The arena floated in lazy defiance of physics, a hulking torus of chrome and carbonite drifting above a jungle moon that smelled like rotting cinnamon and sounded like an orchestra of screaming birds. It was called the Menagerie, both ironically and by official decree, and today it would host the 9,427th annual hunt-off, which, as everyone from bureaucrats to biomechanical assassins understood, was less about intergalactic diplomacy and more about spectacle, wagers, and the deeply satisfying act of watching other species fail. From the observation decks, the galaxy's elites gathered like mold on a forgotten pastry. There were centipede dignitaries sipping liquefied uranium through ivory straws, mist creatures hovering in personal force fields so they wouldn't accidentally condense, and aristocratic blobs wearing monocles for the aesthetic alone. The commentary hovered above the chaos in several hundred languages, available via neural tap or the old-fashioned earworm. "Welcome, glorious scions of sapience," blared the announcer, a 12-lunged cephalopod named VRRCH, whose voice oscillated between velvet and chainsaws. "Today, we revisit an old favorite, a human versus something significantly more evolved." Applause rippled like an earthquake through a bowl of jelly. The camera orbs zoomed, swooped, and pirouetted across the arena's obsidian floor, where terrain had already begun to shift. Today's landscape would feature uneven basalt ridges, spore bloom clusters, and, in a nod to nostalgia, a gravity well that sucked at the knees. In Section Theta, high above the kill zone, for ministers of interspecies trade were locked in a diplomatic drinking game. Each time a contestant lost a limb, they took a shot. No one expected to survive round 3. "Let's talk stakes," VRRCH intoned. Should the Zyglor swarm win, they gain harvesting rights to Belt 7764 and a temporary suspension on their war crime quota. "If the human somehow survives," he chuckled, a wet gurgle that made 2 viewers spontaneously molt, "well, we'll all enjoy a good laugh." Human combatants were considered a novelty act, what you added at the end of the menu to shock your guests and provoke polite laughter. Charming, chaotic, and usually dead within minutes. The last human entrant had tried to tame a Grux beast with dental floss and was now commemorated on a popular line of gravestones. So when the portal shimmered and opened onto the main stage, and a lone figure stepped out, the reaction was, predictably, mockery. Even the fungi laughed, which involved spitting spores in each other's faces. She was tall by human standards, though the Zyglor's definition of tall included bioluminescent scaffolding. Her armor was a mismatched patchwork of military surplus and aftermarket plating, etched with tiny symbols no one recognized but many would later attempt to license. Her boots squelched against the humid stone, and dangling from her neck, swaying as she moved, were 2 dull pieces of metal, dog tags. No one knew her name yet. That was part of the act. In a private betting lounge suspended over the arena, odds updated in real time. Zyglor champion, 1.001 to 1. Human woman, 9,000 to 1. Arena malfunction, 7 to 1. Human sneezes mid-fight and dies anyway, 42 to 1. Back on the main floor, the human didn't look up at the crowd. She didn't bow, or wave, or pull out a dramatic weapon. She simply rolled one shoulder, then the other, and let out a sigh loud enough for the mics to pick up. In her head, she counted the number of elevated platforms. 6. 1 cracked. The gravity well pulsed every 27 seconds, skewing projectiles eastward. 2 types of native mold were likely hallucinogenic. Noted. She shifted her weight and waited. The Zyglor champion was announced with thunder, lighting, and a musical accompaniment of shrieking glass. Hastar the Spine Ripper emerged in ceremonial glory, his 8 limbs gleaming with polished exoskeleton, his mouthparts adorned with trophies, teeth, claws, and, for some reason, a rubber duck. "He shall dine on her regrets," the announcer bellowed. Hastar has not lost a match since he was spawned during a solar flare. The Zyglor roared and slammed a clawed fist against his chest. The shockwave rippled through the arena. Several viewers in the lower decks had to be peeled off the railings. Betting odds adjusted again. Someone bet 300,000 credits that the human would vaporize herself to avoid dying messily. Burst cleared his many throats. And now, a word from our charming challenger. A mic drone hovered before the human. She looked at it, then at the crowd, then said, "No refunds." The crowd laughed. Not kindly. In the control booth, one analyst leaned toward their superior, a tentacled blob named Seer-class Zul. Should we, verify her file? There's a weird lock on her service record. Zul blinked all 9 eyes. Please. They're humans. You can't take 10 steps on Terra without tripping over an ex-soldier with a tragic past and unresolved father issues. Below, Ellie, though no one had spoken her name yet, paced the perimeter of the ring. The gravity well tugged gently at her boots. She made a note to stay west of the fungal overgrowth and east of the acid pits. Her eyes were calm. Her breath, even. Her dog tags clinked faintly with every step. Hastar advanced to the center and howled something guttural, invoking ancestral war rites and a legal disclaimer. The floor rippled. The rules were recited by a 3-headed ferret in a bow tie. No projectile weaponry. No outside assistance. All death shall be final and culturally respected. Ellie tapped her wrist interface. Nothing. Jammed. Standard sabotage. Her neural link to the targeting AI returned a feedback loop of saxophone music. She didn't flinch. Overhead, the announcer's voice returned. Giddy now. Let the hunt commence. The lights dimmed. The crowd inhaled. The arena stilled. And Ellie smiled. Just a flicker. Not for the show, or the fans, or the pomp. But because she knew something they didn't. They didn't read the tags. The opening gong sounded, a deep, shuddering tone like the belly of a dying star. Hastar roared, charged, and the crowd surged forward to witness what they thought would be another beautifully orchestrated massacre. But at that exact moment, on 3 different battlecruisers parked in orbit, 3 different commanders simultaneously received an alert. A security file unsealed. A name blinked red across their screens. Jameson, Ellie, Black Star Unit, Level 9 Restricted Engagement. Do not confront alone. Too late. She was already moving. And in the seats high above, someone important, stood up slowly, eyes narrowing at the woman's tags. Wait, they whispered. That insignia. That's not ceremonial. That's clearance. In the next beat, the arena floor shifted again. But no one laughed this time. The Zyglor hunter moved like a living avalanche, 8 limbs propelling him across the arena in jarring bursts, the plates of his exoskeleton grinding like tectonic friction. Each step left a crater. He loosed a war cry that vibrated through bones, bounced off domes, and caused a diplomat from the feathered realms to faint dramatically into a bowl of fermented pollen. Ellie didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned down, quietly rolled up her left pant leg, and pulled out a short, worn-down carpenter's pencil from the strap on her boot. The cameras zoomed in. The betting markets flickered in confusion. She examined the pencil like a surgeon about to make the first incision. Licked the tip. Tucked it behind her ear. Then gave the Zyglor a nod, as if to say, "Ready when you are, bug boy." The crowd roared with laughter. Not at her bravery, but at the absurdity. A human. With a pencil. Species always bring toys, grumbled one elder of the Dominion of Bladed Clouds. At least the rodent makes it theatrical. And then Hastar lunged. Ellie ducked. No flourish, no slow-motion heroics. She simply pivoted. 2 inches to the left. Just enough for his primary claw to miss by a hair's breadth. She could feel the breeze as it passed. From the corner of her eye, she noted the torque behind the swing. The Zyglor's lower limbs had not been weighted correctly. Sloppy. He was used to opponents running. Not calculating. She could work with that. He snarled, wheeled around, and launched a strike from the rear, an arcing sweep designed to cut her in half at the waist. She dropped flat to the ground. Dust exploded around her. She stayed prone long enough to flick a pebble into a shallow crevice to her right. 2 seconds later, the ground there collapsed slightly. A gravity slip pocket. Useful later. She rolled to her feet. Glanced up at the cameras. "You all bet against me," she muttered. Rude. Up in the High Council viewing box, the ambassadors of the Zyglor swarm were already passing around pre-written victory statements. One bureaucrat was composing a poem titled Elegy for the Soft Ones. Another placed an order for commemorative protein bars made from simulated human tissue, for flavor authenticity. Back in the arena, Hastar bellowed again. Saliva, viscous and luminous, hissed where it touched the basalt. He widened his stance. Eyes dilated. Breath came in bursts of phenomenal steam. Ellie yawned. Then she spoke, quiet, flat, unhurried. You breathe too much from your third thoracic vent. It throws your balance. That earned a pause. Aliens weren't used to humans offering critiques during battle. Hastar roared in response. Charged again. This time, he tried misdirection. 2 limbs to strike, 2 to flank, 2 to brace. A well-practiced formation. But Ellie was no amateur. She had served in 17 planetary conflicts. Her name was etched on a satellite buried under polar ice. Entire diplomatic manuals had been rewritten in her honor, though none of them, oddly, mentioned the pencil. She let him come close. Too close. Then she stepped into the charge, ducked under the flailing limbs, and jabbed upward, once, into a seam between exoskeletal plates at the Zyglor's side. The pencil cracked. Hastar froze. The crowd went silent. It hadn't been a hard blow. Certainly not enough to cause serious injury. But he stumbled back a step. Blinked. Because the pencil, yes, the pencil, had released a microscopic burst of ionic interference. Not a weapon by arena standards, but enough to scramble the sensory interface between his internal and external vision layers. He saw 2 of her now. One grinning. One already circling. The crowd, still assuming slapstick, roared again. To them, it was comedy. A woman with a pencil, playing Matador. But somewhere, in a restricted access vault buried within the arcane bureaucracy of the Central Accord, Ellie's file flashed open once more. Subject: Ellie Jameson. Classification: Decommissioned Black Star Operative. Clearance: Redacted/Redacted. Engagement Protocol: Avoid unless planetary threat level is authorized. In the viewing box, a tall, silken-skinned member of the tribunal leaned toward a console and whispered, "Confirm source of that insignia on her tags." The AI did not respond for 3 full seconds. Then, Black Star Unit confirmed. Historical Unit. Terminated under Veil Doctrine after Event Echo 37. The tribunal member blinked. That unit was erased. Apparently, not all of it. Back in the arena, Hastar was snarling in confusion. His vision flickered. His depth perception was off. He swung again, wildly, and Ellie spun to the left, delivering a short kick to the back of his knee joint. His leg buckled. Not fully, but enough. She wasn't trying to kill him. Not yet. She wanted him disoriented. Wanted the whole crowd watching as someone who had once been dismissed as vermin took apart a biological war machine, piece by piece. The cameras caught it all. They streamed it live to 400 systems, 39 primary news feeds, and 1 pirate channel hosted by a sentient cheese wheel named Marvin. And through it all, Ellie moved with elegance. Efficiency. She fought like someone solving a math problem in real time, each movement a variable, each limb a predictable factor in a larger equation. Her internal monologue ticked. Left dorsal limb overextends by 12% after forward propulsion. Probable compensatory angle from the rear, a 9 degrees sweep. Exploit gap in rotation. Delay. Disorient. Don't escalate yet. Let them see. It wasn't enough to win. She needed the galaxy to watch her win. Because that was the plan. Not to survive. To remind them. Another rush. Another dodge. She pulled the pencil stub from behind her ear, blew on it once, and jammed it into the arena floor. This time, it hissed. Microscopic tech. Banned, of course. But no one had checked the pencil. It didn't register on scans. A puff of purple mist curled upward. Nothing visible. But the effect was immediate. Hastar staggered. His equilibrium flickered again. A counter-frequency. Delicate. Targeted. Ellie closed the distance. Tapped the end of the pencil on his shoulder. "Tag," she said. "You're it." The Zyglor howled. All elegance gone. He lunged, uncoordinated, and barreled past her into the side of a grav slope. A cascade of basalt crashed around him. She didn't follow. She waited. Because now, she knew the cameras were finally zoomed in on the tags around her neck. The laughter slowed. The crowd began to murmur. 100 species narrowed their eyes. The betting line collapsed in real time. Odds dropped from 9,000:1 to 300:1 in seconds. Markets scrambled. Commentators stammered. One passed out. In the control tower, a technician whispered, "Do we stop the match?" "No," the tribunal answered. "We document the match." And still, she waited. She let the Zyglor rise, bloodied, furious, burning with humiliation. He staggered to his feet, eyes ablaze. He saw the tags then. He froze. The crowd didn't know why, but he did. Because etched into those tags was not just her name, but a sigil. A red-marked insignia of the Black Star Unit. One of a handful of operations whose existence had required 7 galactic treaties to cover up. Units used when even extinction was too polite a solution. And she had been one of them. He had seen one once. In a briefing. As a cautionary tale. You do not engage. And certainly not alone. Ellie met his eyes. Quietly, she said, "This is your last warning." He stepped back. It was barely perceptible. A single half-step. But the arena caught it. And the galaxy gasped. Because that wasn't part of the show. That wasn't theater. That was fear. Ellie slowly crouched, picked up her broken pencil, and tucked it away again. She smiled. And for the first time in the broadcast's history, the commentators had no words. The match wasn't over. But something fundamental had changed. Ellie Jameson was no longer the underdog. She was the one they'd forgotten to fear. And now, it was too late. The arena had changed. What had once been a predictable farce, a charming interspecies bloodbath where a human was expected to flail, flounder, and expire with some comedic flourish, was now a hanging silence draped over 30,000 onlookers and several billion broadcast viewers. Even the miasmic spores swirling above the fungal box seats seemed to hesitate mid-glow, unsure if humor was still the appropriate response. A moment ago, Ellie Jameson had been a punchline. A walking, talking, doomed mammal with a pencil and some attitude. Now, she was something else entirely. Something the Zyglor hunter couldn't quite quantify, only that his limbs felt heavier, his sight was double-shadowed, and the woman before him was no longer a distraction. She was a calculus. And he was on the wrong side of the equation. From the skybox booth, VRRCH, 12-lunged cephalopod, showman extraordinaire, cleared his vocal tract and attempted a jovial re-entry. Ah, dear viewers, a surprising turn of events. But let us not forget, this is the hunt-off. A contest of tenacity, instinct, and apparently unexpected footnotes in military history. Laughter trickled from a few corners of the arena, but it was nervous now. The kind of laughter that checks over its shoulder. On the battlefield, Hastar steadied himself. 2 limbs planted. 2 raised. Breathing slowed. He rotated his neck in tight, controlled arcs, trying to reorient. He didn't speak, because Zyglor etiquette dictated that any warrior who required threats mid-fight had already admitted doubt. Ellie stood perfectly still. 1 foot on a cracked ridge. Her hands loose at her sides. Her expression unreadable. But her mind was racing. Grav tilt vector has narrowed. Visibility patch above fungal ridge. Smoke thinned. Weak spot in his outer plating, back left. Recalculate angle on approach. Assume escalation. He'll switch to internal weaponry next. The arena knew nothing of her thoughts, of course. To them, it looked like 2 fighters facing off in eerie stillness. Only a few observers, those with long memories and access to classified skirmish data, understood the tactical depth in that silence. In the intergalactic arbitration lounge, panic was blooming. Quietly, the Terran delegate, Ambassador Cleth, an artificial life form shaped like an overly polite marble column, whispered to its aide, "You verified her identity before authorizing her entry?" The aide, A jittery insectoid with a clipboard neural implanted in its chest cavity hesitated. She did present papers. They were outdated, yes, but appeared ceremonial. Ceremonial, Cleth hissed. That's a black star insignia around her neck. That's not ceremony. That's policy suicide with a lanyard. Meanwhile, the Zyglor delegation sat frozen. Not with reverence. With insult. The swarm had not known about the dog tags until the cameras zoomed in. They'd seen the look in Hastar's eyes. Recognition. Hesitation. They were not bred for hesitation. Now, it was personal. Below, Hastar moved again. Faster this time. Lower to the ground. He adjusted his weight, altering his center of gravity for close-quarters conflict. His claws retracted slightly, allowing finer motor control. The Zyglorian audience recognized the shift. He'd abandoned public performance. This was war form posture. Ellie's expression didn't change. But her posture did. Slightly. Just enough. And when he charged, the world snapped into motion. She ducked beneath his first strike, faster than before, hooked her heel behind his forward limb, and redirected his momentum with a half pivot. Not enough to drop him. Just enough to imbalance. He compensated, predictably. She rewarded him with a flat-palmed strike to the thoracic nerve cluster. It didn't hurt him, but it scrambled him. Again. The crowd began murmuring in waves now. The cameras struggled to follow the exchange, each movement surgical, impossibly fast, driven by intent and prediction rather than brute force. She's not reacting, someone whispered in the control room. She's anticipating. Hastar growled low and activated his secondary organ array. 2 protrusions burst from beneath his chest plate. Glowing, lashing, chemical-laced tendrils meant to paralyze prey on contact. He struck out in a flurry, coating the area in neurotoxic mist. Ellie was already gone. She'd mapped the spray radius in her head. She reappeared on his blind side, used the terrain's slant to accelerate, then rammed her shoulder against the one plate she'd weakened earlier with a pencil. The sound was dull. A pop, not a crack. But he staggered. For the second time. She didn't press the advantage. Not yet. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to make the Zyglor realize he was losing, and make sure everyone else saw it happen. Up in the betting vaults, the systems were crashing. Odds were reversing. Insurers were fleeing contracts. One betting syndicate lit itself on fire, metaphorically and literally, in sheer protest. In the tribunal balcony, Ambassador Zull of the Spectral Accord put down his drink. "You fools let her in here," he muttered. "You let her compete. Do you realize what happens if she wins?" No one answered. They were all watching the floor. Watching Ellie step back. Watching Hastar breathe heavier. He charged again. This time with less precision. Rage had edged into his posture. Sloppiness followed. She baited him toward the fungal ridge. Her footfalls were precise, measured, barely pressing spores into the dust. His were violent, loud. She ducked under one claw, let him overextend, and kicked outward, sending him stumbling through a cluster of pale blue mushroom caps. They detonated. Softly. Just enough to disorient. The air shimmered with hallucinogenic particles. Hastar staggered, roaring. His claws flailed wide. He saw visions, ghosts of hunts long past, prey he'd lost, limbs that had once belonged to him. Ellie waited until the moment his gaze cleared, and locked onto hers. Then she raised her left hand, held up 2 fingers, dropped them. His rage coalesced into fury. He launched himself into a forward spin, whirling claws like hurricane blades. She dropped, slid under the strike. And as she passed beneath him, spine arched, hand outstretched, she tapped the inside of his rear limb with her knuckles. He landed, and his leg gave out, collapsed beneath him. The arena gasped. The Zyglor fell to one knee, not out, but stunned, and suddenly mortal. From the VIP level, a diplomat let out a sharp breath. "She's not trying to kill him. She's teaching him," another said. And she was. Ellie walked backward, slow and deliberate, eyes on her opponent. Her voice rose now, quiet, but clear, picked up by every mic. "You should have read the tags," she said. The crowd held its breath. Ellie turned her back, walked to the center of the ring, and sat, cross-legged, waiting. She was daring him to come, to try again, to prove he was still in control. And that, more than any physical blow, was the insult. In the Zyglor code, battle was sacred. A challenger turning their back meant they no longer saw you as a threat. Hastar rose slowly, trembling. This wasn't just a human anymore. This was a tactician. This was humiliation carved in real time before the eyes of the galaxy. He roared again, more shriek than command now, and charged. Ellie didn't move. Until the last second. She rolled left, swept his front leg, let his body pitch forward, and then she delivered one clean palm strike to his lower neck. A pressure point few outside of Zyglor biology would have known existed. He dropped, hard, breathing, alive, but unconscious. The arena sat in stunned silence. Ellie stood over him, not triumphant, just still. And then finally she reached up, touched the tags on her chest, and let them clink audibly into her hand. "Threat assessment," she muttered, "needs an update." She turned, walked off the field, and left the galaxy gasping behind her. The arena did not erupt into celebration. There was no confetti, no triumphant blare of horns, no gleeful explosions of advertising from the holographic skybox above. The silence was total, deep, vacuum-sealed. Ellie Jameson walked away from the center ring with her boots echoing against the scorched basalt. Every step sounded like a verdict. Her silhouette, backlit by the dying light of the arena's artificial sun, was burned into a million lenses, each struggling to understand what had just happened. Behind her, Hastar remained unmoving, unconscious, intact in body, undone in spirit. He wasn't just defeated, he had been disassembled in full view of galactic society. Not with brute force, not with flashy theatrics, but with something far more dangerous, calculated restraint. That was what chilled the Watchers more than anything else. She could have killed him. She chose not to. And that, somehow, was worse. In the executive command deck orbiting above the arena moon, Admiral Vress of the Coalition Intelligence Corps stared at the live feed. The edges of her screen pulsed crimson with classified alerts. She had already received 19 encrypted queries from intelligence agencies spanning 4 quadrants, each one asking the same question. "Is it her?" She exhaled. "It's her." Across from her, an aide whispered, Should we extract the diplomatic staff from the arena zone?" "No. That'll cause more panic. And if she wanted them dead, they'd already be bones." Vress leaned back. "Issue the alert anyway. Tag all Black Star veterans as active assets until we confirm otherwise." But the Black Star program was dissolved. Tell that to the Zyglor bleeding in the crater. Back below, in the cushioned comfort of the tribunal balconies, no one moved. Ambassador Tluth of the Zyglor swarm was frozen mid-reach, the declaration of conquest still clutched in one scaled talon. His translator unit began sputtering error messages as the footage replayed, over and over, of Hastar collapsing to the arena floor. And walking away, in perfect clarity, with the 2 dog tags clinking around Ellie's neck. Everyone had seen the mark etched into them now. They were not decorative. They were not ceremonial. They were classified. In the diplomatic gallery, the whispers began, redacted engagement files. Off-book operations. Shadow units deployed only when annihilation wasn't merely acceptable but optimal. Ellie Jameson wasn't a mercenary. She was a message. And no one had read the memo in time. The arena broadcast tried to recover, spooling out pre-recorded commentary and rerunning highlights of the fight, but the momentum was dead. The narrative had shifted. This was no longer the story of a plucky human triumphing against overwhelming odds. This was the revelation that the odds had been misunderstood entirely. Humans were not comic relief. They were not wild cards. They were something the galaxy had spent centuries trying to forget. And Ellie had just reminded everyone. In the docking bay beneath the arena, Ellie stepped through the access corridor, peeling off the outer layers of her armor as she walked. Her ribs ached, her left shoulder was already bruising, and she had 3 minor lacerations that would need stitching. But none of that mattered. She'd made her point. Her ship, an ugly angular shuttle shaped like a coffin with thrusters, sat waiting. Its name, scratched into the hull in 3 languages, read, Clarification. The ramp lowered with a sigh of pressure. Her boots thudded on the metal floor. The onboard AI, a voice pattern once modeled after a sardonic barista, chirped to life. Welcome back. Would you like to hear how many systems have placed a bounty on your head in the last 7 minutes? She didn't bother answering. 7, by the way. A modest increase. Mostly bureaucratic. 1 from a casino. Ellie slumped into the pilot's seat. Her hands trembled slightly. Adrenaline backlash. She pulled the dog tags from around her neck and set them gently on the console. A piece of worn cloth, wrapped tightly around the chain, fell open. Inside, a folded piece of paper, crumpled, faded, but still legible. She didn't unfold it. She knew every word. Instead, she keyed in coordinates. Deep space. Beyond regulation zones. No beacons. No flight paths. Somewhere quiet. The ship hummed, locked trajectory, and engaged thrusters. As they rose, the arena shrank behind her. Just a ring of stone and fire now, surrounded by ships full of diplomats who would soon forget how to breathe without protocols to guide them. They would meet. They would argue. They would demand records, initiate hearings, sanction territories. Someone would suggest classifying all humans as culturally unengageable. Someone else would argue it was a fluke. And someone, somewhere, would ask the right question. What else are they hiding? Ellie leaned back, closed her eyes. Let the vibration of jump initiation lull the chaos out of her muscles. She hadn't been on a battlefield in years. Not since the Black Star unit had been decommissioned. Not since her team had been buried under planetary code black, each name scrubbed from existence, their survival labeled unconfirmed anomalies.